the biggest loser, I thought, from the NFL trade deadline was the Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, DeAndre Hopkins all should have been traded. This was the day to do so. They should have made the move and traded all three of those guys today. For Derrick Henry's not on this team next year. Derrick Henry is going to be 30 years old. You're not re-signing a 30-year-old running back with that much tread on the tires. And you have to redesign your offense. Like if the Titans want to compete in the AFC, you can't have an offense built around a running back. You can't have an offense built in 1970. And that is, retooling, getting a quarterback, opening it up more, and getting away from the ground and pound that Tennessee has become the last few years. You could do that with Derrick Henry, but also as we're starting to see, Derrick Henry is getting worn down. Again, about to be 30 years old. You're not re-signing him. And so if you're not going to re-sign him and he's not going to be the focal point of your offense next year, why would you keep him on this roster for another 2 months? Like the season's over for Tennessee. Nice win over the Falcons on Sunday, but don't get fooled into thinking that this Tennessee team now is a legitimate contender all of a sudden. They're 3-4. They're going nowhere in the AFC South. They're not a contender right now in the AFC. They can't allow one game, which Will Levis played really well, to his credit. But you can't allow one game to change the course of not only this season, but your future and cost you valuable draft capital to rebuild your offense next year and beyond. Derrick Henry should have been traded today, and same with DeAndre Hopkins. Look, this is a guy that was invisible in this Tennessee offense up until 2 days ago. Not a lot of targets, not a lot of receptions, not a lot of end zone trips, and all of a sudden Will Levis comes in 3 touchdowns. But for DeAndre Hopkins, even though he's under contract through 2024, so he'll be back next year, he's on the future plans of the Tennessee Titans. Again, this is a rebuild for Tennessee, not a retooling. This is not a one offseason project where you can go in, make a few signings, and all of a sudden now you're back on the competitive track. They got years to rebuild this offense. You got to find a quarterback. After one start, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Will Levis is the guy. Absolutely not. You got to find someone either in the draft, you want to make a trade, a signing. If they need help on the outside of receiver, you have to find a new replacement for Derrick Henry. The offensive line could use a little bit of bolstering as well. This is a more than one offseason project. So if it's going to be a multi-year rebuild, DeAndre Hopkins is not going to be around for that. He's 32 years old. He's on a 2-year deal. By the time you kind of hit the ground running and try to get out of the rebuild mode and go into contender mode, Hopkins is going to be somewhere else, or maybe honestly retired from the league. So he's not in your future plans. Even though he's under contract for next year, I think your best bet of getting the most value back would have been trading him now for some desperate wide receiver needy teams and trying to capitalize on a bidding war. So I think Hopkins should have been traded. And Tannehill, speaking of bidding war, Ryan Tannehill is not a very good quarterback. He's okay. He's average. But with that said, with the rash of quarterback injuries that we saw happen over the weekend, his value has never been greater. You look at right now, I know they made a trade, but if he was on the block earlier on Tuesday, you have the Vikings, who still are going for it now at 4-4, despite Kirk Cousins being out for the year. The Jets their offense stinks. Any sort of competency would be welcomed. The Browns could use some competency at quarterback. P.J. Walker is not doing a great job. And not to mention, I have no idea when Deshaun Watson's coming back. That's been one of the most, weird situations where no one actually knows what's going on with Deshaun Watson's shoulder, and there's no accurate timeline of when he could return. He could return next week. He also could be out the rest of the season. We have no idea. If I'm the Browns with that championship-level defense, I'm not taking any chances. I would have traded for Tannehill, brought him in, and, best case, he starts for a week or two. Worst case, he starts for the rest of the year, and you still have a chance to make the playoffs. And the Rams, it doesn't look like Matthew Stafford's thumb injury is that serious, but it's still open, at least of right now, that he could be on IR. And if the Rams, I know they're 3-5, but if you still want to compete and go for it, or at least try to see if you can turn the season around, you have a lot better chance right now of turning it around with Ryan Tannehill versus any other quarterback on the roster or any other quarterback you could go acquire through free agency. So you have a little bit of a market here where Ryan Tannehill actually looks valuable. Take advantage of that. Otherwise, he's a free agent and gone at the end of the year. So the Titans, I thought, made a big mistake by standing pat and holding on to Derrick Henry, holding on to DeAndre Hopkins, and holding on to Ryan Tannehill. Take advantage right now of a market that would have been competitive for all three of those guys. Two of the three are not back next year anyway with their contracts, so don't lose them for nothing. Get something and use those pieces to work towards a rebuild of this offense in 2024 and beyond. Titans made a big mistake, I thought, by sitting pat, standing pat, and not doing any moves at the deadline.